Sharing is Caring by Itslivybear, Chapter 21, 48 Hours Remain. Aizawa did wake him up at dawn, but while Izuku yawned, he hadn't stayed up like some of the others apparently had, based on the groaning and complaining. He decided to wear one of the outfits Mama Amina had gotten him, with the loose bungrundy shirt with the knot tie and some leggings, and he smiled softly, breathing in the mountain air. Being out in nature was really nice. The city was loud, fast, and in your face for every sense. But being so far away from civilization was quiet, more even-paced, and more ambient than the demanding in your attention. All the stress from being in the crowds of people trying to avoid skin contact and touch, trying to suppress copy from activating, all of that was gone. People were around, sure, but it was either the fact that he knew and trusted them, and he had enough room to get away, or the fact that he was slowly starting to use his borrowed quirks and wasn't afraid. Maybe a bit of both. Or, of course, he was still silent. He still tended to avoid skin-to-skin contact, but he knew healing didn't happen overnight. And he was starting to accept that, yes, this was healing. He was getting better, bit by bit, helped by his classmates, friends, and teachers. He wasn't certain if he would totally be ready to talk to his soulmates, but, well, he would try. He felt lighter than he had in years.
Oh, good. You're finally all awake enough for this. Let's see why not. Also, you throw the ball with your quirk, just like the beginning of the year.
She blinked, but stepped forward, grabbing the ball. She tossed it with her tongue, launching it through the sky just like she had done before. Her score was only another meter farther than it had been at the beginning of the year. What? Aizawa quieted the class.
We've been working on your tactics thus far and teaching you how to not die. The purpose of this training camp is to train you, your quirks, soulmates, or otherwise, to prepare you to get your provisional licenses.
The class looked super excited about this and split off at the direction of the Pussycats, going to their set-up zones.
Midoriya, Aizawa called, gaze sharp. 1B will be getting here in 2 hours. Would you be willing to work with your two soulmates on their quirks? You have about 10 years of catching up to do. If not, you can just keep working on your own quirk.
Izuku bit his lip. He only really knew one of them, Shinzo Hitoshi, but it sounded like both of them were in 1B and would both be there. Was he ready to face them in a scanning 2 hours? Well, it wasn't like it was talking. It could be strictly training, right? Yeah, no. Neither of them would probably let that happen. Still, I'll try, he whispered, looking away. Aizawa breathed a sigh of relief.
Good. In the meantime, you will be working with Tiger. I'll come get you when 1B arrives. If at any point you want to leave, you can.
Izuku nodded, heart pattering in his chest, but he smiled. It was going to be okay, and if it wasn't, he could leave. He got so caught up in sparring with Tiger and the other melee fighters that when Aizawa came to get him, he was shocked at how much time had passed. Had it already been 2 hours? Tiger grinned and clapped him on the back.
You did good, kid. Good work.
He smiled and followed his teacher back into the woods to a clearing. He stopped and suddenly felt horribly self-conscious. Even if he was willing to talk to them now, he had actively avoided them for weeks, months. Who's to say that didn't hate him now and that they hadn't gotten annoyed at having to run after him for so long? What if they just decided that he needed to go without their quirks for 10 years since they had been without his? Aizawa stopped beside him and crouched down a little. "Kid," he muttered, "it's not going to be bad, I promise. And if it is, you can run right back, no problem. I'll be close, you'll be okay." Izuku took a few fortifying breaths, clenched his hands, and nodded sharply. He walked into the clearing, and he was only shaking a little. Neto was incredibly nervous. Apparently, they would be officially meeting their third soulmate when they arrived at camp to help him. His name was Midoriya Izuku. They had a name and a face. With their quirks to work together like all the soulmate pairs were going to be doing at camp. The fact that they had a lot of catching up to do was a given. "Okay, so treat him like me, when you first met me. It sounds like we have a lot of trauma to unravel." Neto rolled his eyes as they got off the bus walking through the woods. "We both rewatched the sports festival when we figured it out. He wasn't angry like you were. He's scared." Aizawa caught their eye and nodded. You're here. Come with me, then I'll bring him to you. He's in a fragile place right now, and he's just barely healing from gaslighting and conditioning. Try anything or do anything that hurts him more, and I will put you both in remedial training for the rest of camp." They exchanged a glance and nodded back at the 1A teacher. "Good. I'll be right back." As soon as he was out of sight, Neto rounded on Hitoshi. "Gaslighting? Jesus, no wonder he was avoiding us. Fuck, Hitoshi, the Explodo bitch. I knew he knew something." Hitoshi narrowed his eyes. "No wonder that fucker looked so smug. This is all his fault." Neto sighed. "No matter what, we're going to have to be very gentle with this." Hitoshi tensed as they heard Aizawa's voice and began fidgeting. "Neto," he hissed. "What do we say? Hi, sorry your life was shitty. Want to test our quirks?" "No, you idiot." Neto's breath caught as Midoriya Izuku walked into the clearing. Despite the glaring teacher right behind him, nothing could really stop his eyes from being drawn to the small boy. Midoriya was tiny, and his face was covered in freckles. Neto could see the panic in his bright green eyes, and his heart ached. Also, he looked really cute. Whoever dressed this boy deserved a fucking medal. Hitoshi was in a similar state of panic beside him, eyes dropping to the little sliver of skin showing from the tied-up shirt and then wrenching them away. Midoriya definitely hadn't looked this small in the sports festival, and Hitoshi had never felt more like a giant than he had in this moment. He was easily half a foot taller than the boy if you didn't count the bush of curly green and black hair. Even Neto was taller by 3 inches. "Hello." He bit his lip and looked away. I'm Midoriya Izuku." Neto stepped forward, false confidence easy to set into, and held out a hand. "Monomo Neto, copy quirk. It's nice to meet you." Hitoshi was jolted out of his reverie and also strode forward as the small boy shook Neto's hand. "Shinzo Hitoshi," he drawled. "Brainwashing. Was kinda hoping to fight you in the sports festival, but that didn't happen." Hitoshi internally cursed himself. Why was he so bad at communication? Midoriya smiled weakly. "Yeah, I got myself out by accident. It's nice to meet you." Neto fidgeted for a moment. Are you okay? I mean, I'm not going to say we had the same experiences, because from the sounds of things, we definitely didn't. But Toshi and I didn't have the best childhood either, and while manifesting a quirk this late is almost always a stress manifestation that involves almost dying, so
Neto, calm down. Jesus Christ. It freaked us out to suddenly have a third quirk because that's not how it's supposed to happen, and there's no good explanation for how you got one that isn't horribly traumatic, and he was cut off by gentle hands catching his waving arms and stilling them. He blinked down at the worried green eyes before Midoriya seemed to realize what he had done and flushed red, practically flinging Neto's hands away in embarrassment. Hitoshi sighed and ran a hand down his face. As you can tell, he said wearily, we are not awesome at talking to people. I'm still not sure how we managed to make this work for almost 3 goddamn years, but somehow, we're still here. Neto rolled his eyes. Common enemies do wonders for bonding. Midoriya giggled, and both boys eternally celebrated. But really, Neto insisted, are you okay? It's okay if you're not, but... Midoriya seemed to think, looking at the ground before he looked up with a small smile. I think I am. Izuku managed to last a whole half hour before he gushed about one of their quirks. It's just so helpful at dissolving conflict, he sighed. No matter what, I mean, I've only really used it, 4 times, but still, 3 of those were against actual villains. Shinzo blinked, looking alarmed. You've only used it 4 times? And only against villains? Yikes, that sounds like it'd be really hard. I mean, Neto, do you remember the practicing back in middle school? I mean, that was basically the first time I seriously used my quirk. And I did not last. Holding villains? Forget it, your willpower must be insane, Midoriya. Izuku could feel his face getting hot, but Monoma cocked his head, looking at him with interest. Who did you brainwash? The sludge villain in middle school, then Stain, then Shiriaki at the mall last week. If I didn't, they would have killed someone. Hold up. Shinzo wheezed. Stain? The hero killer? And then the literal leader of the League of Villains. Holy shit. Monoma nodded. To be fair, it is a really cool quirk for that. Train up your mental endurance, and you can change the course of any battle. Izuku shook his head. They broke out of it really quickly, and I had a big headache after. Shinzo pursed his lips. If you don't mind me asking, why did you only use it so recently? I mean, I mostly used it to avoid bullies before Nee showed up and put them in the place. Izuku shrank in on himself. I didn't deserve to use your quirks. They were so cool, even if no one else thought so, and I wasn't contributing at all. It didn't feel right. Monoma blinked. So, it was your power too. Izuku looked away. No, it was like stealing. Plus, I didn't want to burden you guys with my existence, so it was better if I never got into the habit of using them so no one would ever find out. Monoma extended a hand to put on his shoulder and flinched back on instinct. Sorry, I didn't. Monoma just nodded. Sorry. I was the same before I really accepted copy. Touching people was dangerous, it felt like. Izuku looked up at Monoma with a small degree of shock. He understood. Monoma clapped. Speaking of copy, we need to do other quirks to copy and other people to brainwash. Fun fact, Midoriya, but Hitoshi has never been able to really brainwash me or vice versa. So you're also safe from that, probably. The downside of that is we need other people to practice on, so unless we want to work with your quirk, we should probably rejoin the masses and see if a teacher could get us some guinea pigs. Shinzo nodded. What do you call your quirk, by the way? Izuku panicked. He hadn't really thought of a name. He wasn't even sure what All Might had put on his forms. What could he say? Monoma rolled his eyes and lightly smacked Shinzo on the arm. He had 3 months! Who knows everything it's capable of? Maybe he hasn't even named it yet!
Izuku breathed a sigh of relief. An out. Perfect. Shinzo considered it for a moment, then shrugged, conceding the point. Guess we'll have to help you name it then. He blinked, looking away, and Izuku could see the tips of his ears red. I mean, if you want us to, it's your quirk, after all. Izuku hesitated and smiled. Maybe we can, figure it out what it does together? I've never seen anyone else use it, so... Monoma grinned. Then today is your lucky day. Toshi, let's spar. Shinzo sighed, but took up an athletic position, arms up. Bring it, Blondie. I've always been better at grasping new quirks anyway. Maybe I have the copy quirk and you have the brainwashing. Monoma rolled his eyes, but just lunged with a grin. Izuku watched with wide eyes. From what he could see, it was maybe 2-3% of One for All, and so a sixth of what he could do. But the energy changed in the air. The way they got a little faster, how their punches clearly had weight behind them, it was breathtaking. That was his quirk? No, that was One for All, All Might's quirk. Izuku was just using it, and maybe soon All Might would want it back. Izuku had lied to him, putting the whole secret of One for All at risk. Well, he thought, looking at his two soulmates duking it out with grins and smack talk as much as power. Even if All Might wanted it back, he was glad he had gotten this opportunity to get to know both of them. He pushed himself to his feet with a grin. You must have gotten the low-power version because this is maybe a 2%? Both boys looked at him in surprise. What? Izuku blushed and bit his lip to try to keep from laughing. I can only get up to 13% right now myself, though. Monoma cocked his head with narrowed eyes. Well then, he drew out, let's see the difference. Izuku bit his lip, but nodded with a smile. He powered it up to 10% to start and took a stance, breathing out as the power and green electricity filled his veins. They both turned from each other to him, setting their stances, and Izuku grinned before he darted forward. They stood no chance. Small fangirl moment. Oh my god, they're talking! Ah! It's finally happening! We've waited so long for this! And we are almost done with the book. As I'm looking at it, there are 35 and we are going on chapter 22. So, any suggestions would be great of the next one so I can get that started soon as well. So, thank you. Bye.